For 23 years, Sunday night meant one thing: The Ed Sullivan Show. Ed Sullivan himself wasn't a musician or an actor, but he held the keys to the kingdom. A thumbs up from Ed could launch a career into the stratosphere, while a thumbs down often meant professional exile. While he presented a polished family program to millions, he frequently found himself at odds with the legendary performers stepping onto his stage. This is the history of how Ed Sullivan fought and sometimes blacklisted the icons of music to protect his version of American decency. 1. The Blacklist, Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry Lee Lewis was the killer, a piano-pounding force of nature who took the world by storm in 1957. His performance of Whole Lot of Shakin' Going On was a massive hit, but his personal life was about to cross a line that Sullivan simply would not tolerate. News broke in 1958 that the 22-year-old Lewis had married his 13-year-old cousin, Myra Gale Brown. Sullivan was a staunch Catholic and protector of family values who felt horrified by the revelation. Unlike other stars who received second chances, Lewis found himself effectively blacklisted from the show for good. This wasn't just another scandal to Sullivan, but a direct violation of the family contract he maintained with his national audience. 2. The Censored King. Elvis Presley. Most people remember Sullivan filming Elvis only from the waist up, but the actual history behind that decision is more complex. Sullivan initially refused to book Elvis at any price, and even called him unfit for family viewing. That changed when a rival program hosted by Steve Allen beat Sullivan in the ratings by featuring the singer. Business interests eventually won out, and Sullivan agreed to bring the king onto his stage. Despite the famous camera angles used to hide those gyrating hips, Sullivan actually liked Elvis as a person. After the final performance, Ed looked into the camera and told the nation that Elvis was a real decent fine boy, providing the ultimate seal of approval for the young star. 3. The Broken Promise, Jim Morrison and The Doors. The most famous clash in the history of the program happened in 1967. Sullivan's producers specifically asked Jim Morrison to change the word higher to better in the song Light My Fire because they feared drug connotations. Morrison agreed to the change while backstage, but he sang the original lyric anyway once the cameras started rolling. He even stared directly into the lens as he delivered the line, which Sullivan viewed as a blatant act of defiance. A furious host refused to shake their hands when the set ended. When a producer told the band they would never do the show again, Morrison famously replied that they had already done the Sullivan Show. Sullivan never wavered on his decision, and the Doors remained banned for life. 4. The Arrested Pioneer, Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry's relationship with Sullivan was defined by the legal troubles that constantly plagued the architect of rock and roll. Berry appeared on the program early in 1955, but by 1959, he was embroiled in a legal battle involving the Mann Act. Sullivan prided himself on presenting clean entertainers and began to distance himself from Berry as those legal troubles mounted. While Berry was a musical genius, his criminal record made him a persona non grata for a show sponsored by family-centric brands like Lincoln Mercury. The result was a permanent rift between the pioneer of the genre and the most powerful man in television. 5. The Professional James Brown. While rumors of bad blood occasionally surfaced, Sullivan actually held deep respect for the godfather of soul. He admired Brown's discipline above all else, especially since the singer's band was known as the most well-drilled unit in the entire business. Sullivan loved hard workers, and Brown fit that description perfectly. Any tension between them was cultural rather than moral, as Sullivan struggled to understand the raw energy of funk music. He still recognized the power of the performance and invited Brown back multiple times. By calling him the hardest working man in show business on national TV, Sullivan helped cement a legacy that lasted for decades. 6. The Domestic Shadow, Ike and Tina Turner. The public saw a high-energy duo on their television sets, but the backstage reality was far more uncomfortable. Staffers who worked on the show noted that the atmosphere around Ike and Tina felt incredibly tense and controlled. Sullivan lacked proof of the abuse Tina was suffering at the time, but he was noticeably warmer toward her than he was toward Ike. He recognized that Tina was the true star of the act and often focused his praise solely on her during their appearances. What nobody expected at the time was the full extent of the violence happening behind closed doors, though Sullivan seemed to sense the lopsided dynamic. 7. The Master of Production, Phil Spector. Phil Spector never actually performed on the show, But his wall of sound provided the soundtrack for many of Sullivan's most famous episodes in the 1960s. Sullivan booked several of Spector's acts, including the Ronettes and the Righteous Brothers, to bring that specific sound to his audience. While the industry knew Spector was erratic and difficult to work with, no records exist of Sullivan labeling him as dangerous during that era. The ultimate tragedy of Spector's life occurred decades after the show went off the air, meaning Sullivan dealt with him strictly as a powerhouse producer. The Sullivan Standard. Ed Sullivan wasn't a mind reader, but he was a man of his time who believed television was a guest in the American home. He felt that performers should act accordingly when invited into those living rooms. He didn't always get it right, but he defined the moral boundaries of an entire era of entertainment. Whether he was censoring a hip shake or banning a poet for a single word, Ed Sullivan ensured that any artist on his stage had passed the toughest test in show business. That standard created a legacy that still defines how we remember the golden age of music.